I lost my first game of I, Napoleon in less than 5 minutes. So why do I keep coming back to this one again and again? Stay tuned and I'll tell you why here on Legendary Tactics. Thank you to GMT Games for providing Legendary Tactics with a review copy of I, Napoleon. We'll do our best to give you a balanced review here, regardless of that fact. Let me start by saying that I, Napoleon is one of the most unique games I have ever played. When I interviewed Ted Racer, the designer, about this board game before its release, it was tough to visualize exactly what he was speaking about without seeing it in action. In short, this is board game as narrative, as a pure storytelling device. One doesn't win the game per se, although it's certainly possible to lose. There are many ways to lose, in fact. By contrast, winning in this game is a little bit like beating your high score at Pac-Man. It can be satisfying, but not in the traditional way. I understand that this will not sit well with some gamers who want to know exactly how they're doing and whether they are victorious or not. I mean, isn't the point of a game to win? There are a lot of games out there where the game concerns itself with winning and losing, and the narrative and theme are crudely tacked on to give it a sense of flavor beyond the moving puzzle that it really is. But this is not what I, Napoleon is meant to be. It takes the opposite approach. It is a narrative organized around a board game framework to structure its storytelling. In a nutshell, each turn representing a year, you as a player will flip over a certain number of cards that are meant to represent life events in that year of Napoleon Bonaparte's life. These events are resolved one at a time and can be beneficial, harmful, or mixed, as life events tend to be. Along the way, you will experience friendships, battles, campaigns, betrayal, love, both married and otherwise, natural disasters, allies and enemies, and any number of events and relationships that shape your particular historical run-through of Bonaparte's life. You have some agency, but not in all things. Luck has a role to play here, as it does in reality. Broadly speaking, as a story arc, you will start out as an unknown artillery captain in 1793 and work your way up, hopefully to emperor, and live a long and fruitful life, avoiding early death, abdication, and exile. It is an incredibly unique and engaging experience that starts out with more narrow decision-making and grows into an epic tale with plenty of tough decisions that plays out on the game board. Now, does the game have some shortcomings? Yes, absolutely. For one, the decks are a bit of a nightmare to manage because the cards are always coming and going into and from your deck based on game requirements or time frames. It can initially be quite confusing to a new player to figure out what cards go when. The rulebook explains this to some degree, but the reality is that you need to simply play it enough to get a sense of what it's trying to accomplish before you can intuitively begin to play the game properly. Expect to make some mistakes in the early going. Part of the problem is that it seems more complex than it actually is. Also, because of the open sandbox nature of the game, the problem is that the cards do a lot of the heavy lifting in introducing game conditions and sequences that won't be obvious to you the first time through. It can be a bit discouraging to not understand what or why a specific action might be better than the other, unless perhaps you have a working knowledge of Napoleon's life and the events found therein. The game is very well researched, and the event cards I found were both interesting and overwhelming. While on one hand it is nice to learn about events that happened in Napoleon's life on a surface level, the randomness of their play sequence means that the events are stripped of most of their context, and as a result it can be tough to know the importance of certain events. A player of this game will certainly benefit from reading a biography or two in advance of getting this game to the table. I don't know if this is a negative exactly, as I find one of the reasons I enjoy historical board gaming is because the games generate interest in an area which I previously didn't know much about. The challenge is that the sheer volume of events mean that after a while, the events lose a lot of their historical meaning and become more about the game mechanics and the effects they introduce. But this is a minor thing, and certainly won't detract from your experience of the game, provided you bring a little bit of imagination to make up for any shortfalls you have in historical knowledge. So why do I keep coming back to this one? It's simply one of the most unique board games I have ever played. I'm sure there might be some comparisons to games like Tales of the Arabian Nights or something like that, but this is based in history, and that gives it more heft and interest in my opinion. Once the game has been figured out, the game plays quickly and in a relatively straightforward manner. One potentially exciting aspect of this game is that it could be repeated as a game system that can be used to replay the lives of any number of historical figures. I don't know if Mr. Racer will take up the challenge, but hopefully aspiring designers will use this system to cover the lives of Julius Caesar, or Alexander the Great, Winston Churchill, Joan of Arc, or any number of different people. Or even fictional characters. The possibilities are quite literally unlimited. I, Napoleon is not just a game, but a potentially exciting starting point, and ultimately anything that opens up the imagination in this way would have to be called a masterpiece. This is Legendary Tactics.